Rain slips quietly through the night, blurring the world beyond the window. This is made for sleep, where history unfolds gently and without urgency. Tonight, we explore the unusual drinks of ancient Rome, not as oddities but as everyday comforts, habits, and rituals shared in taverns, homes, and quiet corners of the city. Let the rain guide the story at an easy pace. And if you'd like, let me know how you're doing in the comments and what time it is where you're listening from. You're stepping into the kitchens, courtyards and taverns of Rome during the height of the empire, where the drinks people prepare and share reveal as much about daily life as the food they eat. Away from grand banquets and ceremonial toasts, ordinary Romans mix, flavour and sip beverages that help them navigate heat, work and rest. The drinks are practical, familiar and quietly creative. Water forms the foundation of Roman hydration, drawn from public fountains, aqueducts and wells scattered throughout the city. You fill clay jugs in the morning, carrying them back to your apartment or workshop, the weight familiar in your hands. The water is cool when fresh, warming slightly as the day progresses. You drink it plain when thirsty, without ceremony or concern. The taste varies depending on the source. Aqueduct water arrives from distant springs, clear and cold. Well water carries the flavour of the soil it passes through, sometimes mineral, sometimes faintly earthy. The public fountains operate constantly, water flowing from carved stone spouts into basins that overflow into drainage channels. You approach in the early morning when the crowds are thinner, holding your jug beneath the stream. The water splashes against the clay, filling the vessel with a sound that echoes off nearby buildings. Other people wait their turn, some holding multiple containers, others just cupping their hands to drink directly from the flow. Wine appears at nearly every meal, but not in the form you might expect. Pure wine is considered too strong, almost barbaric, so you dilute it with water before drinking. The ratio varies by preference and occasion. Some mix 1 part wine to 3 parts water. Others prefer equal measures. The diluted mixture is lighter, easier to drink throughout the day, and less likely to cloud your judgment during work hours. You adjust the proportions based on the wine's strength and your own tolerance. The wine itself ranges in quality. Cheaper varieties are rough and acidic and benefit significantly from dilution. Better wines have smoother flavour profiles, though you still mix them with water out of custom. The colour ranges from pale gold to deep amber to reddish hues, depending on the grapes and fermentation methods. You pour the wine first into the mixing vessel, watching it swirl as you add water, the two liquids blending into a uniform shade. Children drink the same diluted wine, though their portions contain more water. The practice isn't about intoxication, but about making water more palatable and slightly safer. Wine's acidity helps mask flavours that might indicate spoilage. Parents prepare these drinks without much thought, the same way they prepare bread or porridge. A child's cup might contain 1 part wine to 5 or even 10 parts water, barely tinted with colour, enough to provide flavour without any noticeable effects. Posca is another common drink, especially among soldiers, labourers and those working outdoors. You make it by mixing water with acetum, a sour wine or vinegar. The result is sharp, refreshing, and surprisingly thirst-quenching under the Mediterranean sun. You add a pinch of herbs sometimes, or a touch of honey if you can afford it. The drink is cheap, practical, and widely available. Legionaries carry it in leather flasks during long marches. Construction workers pause to sip it between hauling stones. The taste is tart, almost bracing, but you grow accustomed to it. Posca wakes you up without weighing you down. It doesn't spoil quickly in heat. You can prepare a large batch in the morning and drink it throughout the day without worry. The simplicity appeals to people who need function over flavour. The sharpness cuts through dust and grit in your mouth after hours of physical labour, providing a clean sensation that plain water doesn't quite achieve. Different workers develop their own Posca preferences. Some like it very sour, barely sweetened. Others add enough honey to balance the acidity into something almost pleasant. You might include crushed coriander seeds for an aromatic quality, or mint leaves for cooling freshness. The variations are personal, developed through trial and adjustment over months or years of daily preparation. Milk appears less frequently than you might expect. Romans drink it fresh when available, usually goat or sheep milk rather than cow. The taste is richer and slightly gamey compared to modern equivalents. You consume it soon after milking because it spoils rapidly in warm weather. Some people enjoy it, particularly in rural areas where livestock are nearby. Others find it too heavy for regular consumption. The texture is thicker than water, coating your mouth and throat, filling your stomach more substantially than other drinks. Milk sometimes appears mixed with wine or used in medicinal preparations. Physicians recommend it for certain ailments, claiming it soothes inflammation or helps rebuild strength after illness. Mothers give it to young children for growth and vitality. But as a daily beverage for adults, it remains uncommon. Cheese and other preserved dairy products are more practical for a society without refrigeration. The transformation of milk into lasting forms makes more sense than drinking something that will sour within hours. Fruit juices show up occasionally, pressed from grapes, pomegranates, or citrus when in season. You drink them fresh or mix them with water to stretch the supply. The juices are sweet, pulpy, and valued as treats rather than staples. Wealthier households serve them more regularly. Common families save them for festivals or special occasions. The pressing process requires effort and equipment, making the juice more precious than the whole fruit, which can at least be eaten without special preparation. Pomegranate juice is particularly valued for its deep red colour and complex sweet tart flavour. You cut the fruit open, separate the seeds, and press them to extract the liquid. The juice stains your hands and any cloth. It contacts a vivid crimson that marks you as someone who's been working with the fruit. The flavour is intense enough that you often dilute it, turning the deep red into a lighter pink wash. The rhythm of drinking follows the day's natural divisions. You start with water or diluted wine at breakfast, sipping while you eat bread and cheese. Midday brings another round of drinks, often posca if you're working, or diluted wine if you're at home. Evening meals include wine again, mixed to taste and shared with family or neighbours. The pattern is so ingrained that you feel the absence of these drinks as much as their presence. Missing your midday posca leaves you feeling slightly off balance, as if the day structure has been disrupted. Taverns serve drinks throughout the day, catering to workers, travellers and locals looking for a break. You step inside during a pause, order a cup of wine or posca, and stand at the counter while you drink. The atmosphere is casual and familiar. People come and go, conversation happens but doesn't demand participation. You finish your drink, pay a few coins, and return to your tasks. The tavern keeper knows the regulars by sight, if not by name, pouring their usual drinks without needing to ask. The tavern interior is dim after bright streets, your eyes adjusting to the change in light. The air smells of wine, bodies, and whatever food is being prepared in the back. The floor is packed earth or simple tile, sometimes damp from spilled drinks or cleaning. Amphoras line the walls, each containing different wines or stored posca. The keeper dips a ladle into the appropriate vessel, pouring your portion into a clay cup that's been used by dozens of people before you, and will be used by dozens after. Public fountains provide free water, and you see people stopping to drink straight from the spouts. Children play nearby, splashing and filling containers. The fountains are gathering points, places where different lives briefly intersect. You refill your jug, nod to neighbours, and continue on. The fountains are decorated with varying degrees of elaboration, from simple functional spouts to carved lion heads, or divine figures whose mouths release the water. You develop preferences for certain fountains, favouring those closest to your home or work, or those whose water tastes cleanest. The drinks you consume are unremarkable in the moment, but essential over time. They keep you hydrated, provide mild calories, and mark transitions in your day. You don't think much about them unless they're absent. Then you notice the dryness in your throat, the fatigue that sets in faster without regular sips. The body's need for liquid becomes more apparent in denial than in satisfaction. Street vendors sell drinks in high-traffic areas, calling out to passers-by. You hear them advertising cool wine, fresh posca, and sweetened water. The vendors maintain small setups, sometimes just a table with a few vessels and cups. You stop, make your purchase, drink quickly and move on. The transaction takes moments. The vendor serves dozens or hundreds of customers each day, each interaction brief and functional. Seasonal variations affect what people drink most often. Summer sees increased consumption of posca and cooled wine, anything that helps combat heat. Winter brings more requests for warmed wine at taverns and spiced drinks that provide internal heat. Spring and autumn are moderate, allowing more variety without weather extremes dictating choices. You adjust your drinking patterns with the seasons as naturally as you adjust your clothing, responding to environmental conditions without conscious planning. Different social classes drink the same basic beverages, but in different qualities and contexts. A wealthy merchant drinks diluted wine just as a labourer does, but the merchant's wine comes from better grapes, stored in finer vessels and mixed with purer water. The labourer's wine is rougher and cheaper, but still recognisable as the same type of drink. This shared practice across classes creates a common experience, even as quality differences mark status distinctions. Water quality concerns affect everyone. You learn which sources are most reliable, which fountains occasionally run muddy after heavy rains, and which wells are known for particularly good taste. The knowledge is practical and widely shared. You warn newcomers away from questionable sources and recommend the better options. The information passes through conversation, a collective wisdom about resources essential to survival. Mixing drinks happens in kitchens, workshops, and tavern storage rooms, spaces where practicality governs every choice. You start with basic ingredients and adjust according to taste, weather, and available supplies. The process is straightforward, learned through observation rather than written instruction. Your hands know the movements from repetition. The proportions are estimated by eye and experience rather than measured precisely. Wine storage begins in large clay amphorae, sealed with cork and wax to prevent spoilage. You keep them in cool, dark corners of your home or shop. The vessels are heavy, holding enough wine to last weeks or months depending on household size. When preparing wine for drinking, you pour it into a mixing bowl called a crater. The vessel is wide and shallow, designed for blending. The crater sits on a sturdy surface, stable enough that it won't tip when you stir vigorously. You add water from a separate jug, stirring with a ladle until the mixture reaches your preferred strength. The act of mixing is social as much as practical. When guests arrive, you prepare the wine in front of them, asking their preference. Some like it stronger. Others want barely a hint of wine in their water. You adjust accordingly, and the preparation becomes part of hospitality. The crater sits on a table or stand, accessible to everyone. People can observe the mixing process, seeing that you're not holding back the better wine or over-diluting their portions. The ladle you use for mixing is usually bronze or wood, worn smooth from years of contact with liquid. You dip it into the wine, then the water, watching the colours blend. Sometimes you taste the mixture partway through, adjusting if needed. The process is inexact, but reliable. You've made enough mixed wine to know what the right balance looks like and how it should flow from the ladle back into the crater. Temperature matters significantly. During summer, you cool your mixing water by storing jugs in shaded courtyards or wrapping them in damp cloth. The evaporation lowers the temperature slightly, making the final drink more refreshing. Winter brings a different approach. You warm wine gently over a brazier, adding spices like cinnamon or pepper to create a drink called calda. The warmth spreads through your chest and fingers, welcome on cold evenings. You're careful not to heat the wine too much, as excessive heat drives off flavour and creates an acrid taste. The warming process requires attention. You place a bronze vessel containing the wine near glowing coals, not directly on them. The heat should be gentle and even. You stir occasionally, checking the temperature by touch. When the wine is warm enough to feel pleasant against your palm but not hot enough to scald, it's ready. You add your spices while it warms, giving them time to infuse properly. The kitchen fills with the scent of warmed wine and aromatics, a distinctive smell that signals cold weather comfort. Posca preparation is simpler, but still requires judgment. You pour acetum into water, usually 1 part vinegar to 8 or 10 parts water, though ratios vary widely. Some people add crushed coriander seeds or mint leaves while mixing. Others include a spoonful of honey to balance the sourness. You stir until the honey dissolves, then taste and adjust. The drink keeps for days without losing quality, actually improving slightly as flavours meld. The honey addition requires care. If you add it to cold water, it sinks to the bottom and takes considerable stirring to incorporate. You can speed the process by warming the water slightly first, or by dissolving the honey in a small amount of warm water before adding it to the main batch. You watch the cloudiness clear as the honey finally disperses completely, leaving the liquid transparent again, slightly amber tinted from the honey's colour. Honey plays a frequent role in drink preparation. You dissolve it in warm water first, creating a sweet base called mulsum when combined with wine. The honey must be pure and well mixed, or it settles at the bottom of the cup. You use a wooden spoon, stirring slowly until the mixture turns clear and uniform. Mulsum is popular as a first drink during meals, gently sweet and lighter than spiced wines. The sweetness feels like a welcome, an invitation to relax and enjoy what follows. Different honeys create different flavours in mulsum. Thyme honey is common in your area, producing a distinctive herbal undertone. Some wealthy households acquire honey from specific regions known for particular qualities. Sicilian honey is darker and more robust. Greek honey from slopes where bees feed on wildflowers creates a lighter, more delicate flavour. You work with what you can obtain or afford, but you appreciate the differences when you encounter them. Herbs and spices get added according to season and availability. You crush dried rose petals into wine for floral notes. Thyme, oregano, and marjoram appear in everyday mixtures, adding subtle complexity. The herbs you use are often the same ones that flavour your food, creating continuity between what you eat and what you drink. You keep dried herbs hanging in your kitchen, easily accessed when needed. The crushing releases oils that have concentrated during the drying process, producing more intense flavour than fresh herbs would provide. Pepper and ginger show up in fancier preparations, imported from distant trade routes and used sparingly because of cost. You grind them with a mortar and pestle, releasing oils before stirring them into warmed wine. The grinding requires effort, especially with dried ginger root, which is hard and fibrous. You pound it into smaller pieces first, then grind those into powder. The result is intensely aromatic, potent enough that a small amount suffices for an entire vessel of wine. Fruit-infused drinks require more time and planning. You slice quinces or dates, letting them steep in wine for days or weeks. The fruit softens and releases flavour gradually. You strain the liquid before serving, though some people enjoy eating the wine-soaked fruit afterward. The infusion process happens in sealed containers, checked occasionally to ensure nothing has spoiled. The fruit plumps as it absorbs wine, and the wine darkens as it draws out colour and flavour from the fruit. Quinces are particularly good for infusion because their firm flesh doesn't disintegrate quickly. You cut them into thick slices, removing the core but leaving the skin, which adds tannins that complement the wine. The resulting drink is complex, the quince adding a floral, slightly astringent quality that balances the wine's natural sweetness. You might infuse a large amphora this way, creating enough flavoured wine to last through several weeks of special occasions. Fermentation knowledge shapes more specialised drinks. You understand that grape juice becomes wine through time and controlled conditions, but other fruits can undergo similar transformations. Pomegranate wine appears occasionally, made by crushing the seeds and letting the juice ferment in covered jars. The process is less reliable than grape wine, but when it works, the result is tart and interesting. The fermentation can go wrong more easily than with grapes, producing off flavours or vinegar instead of pleasant wine. Some cooks prepare drinks with grains, creating early versions of beer-like beverages. The process involves soaking barley, allowing it to sprout slightly, then drying and grinding it. You mix the grain with water and let it sit in warmth, where natural yeasts begin fermentation. The drink that results is cloudy, mildly alcoholic, and filling. It's less common in Rome itself, but appears in provinces where grain is more abundant than grapes. The drink is thick enough that it's almost food, providing substantial calories along with its liquid content. Storage vessels matter as much as ingredients. Clay amphora keep wine stable for months if properly sealed. The porous clay allows minimal air exchange, which can actually improve wine over time. Leather flasks are practical for travel but can impart flavour over time, adding slight tannic notes from the leather itself. Glass bottles exist but are expensive and fragile, reserved for valued wines or medicinal preparations. You choose containers based on how long you plan to store a drink and how you'll transport it. Each type of vessel requires different handling. Amphorae are heavy and unwieldy, needing 2 people to move when full. You open them by carefully removing the cork and wax seal, a process that can't be reversed. Once opened, the wine must be consumed or transferred to smaller vessels within a reasonable time. Leather flasks need regular cleaning to prevent them from developing sour smells. Glass requires careful handling and storage where it won't be knocked over. Straining removes sediment and unwanted particles. You pour wine through cloth or woven baskets, catching bits of cork, grape skins or spices. The process clarifies the drink, making it smoother and more pleasant. Some sediment is acceptable, even expected, but excessive cloudiness suggests poor quality or improper storage. The straining cloth becomes stained over time, taking on wine colours that never fully wash out. You dedicate specific clothes to this purpose, not expecting them to remain presentable for other uses. Cleaning vessels between uses prevents contamination and off flavours. You rinse mixing bowls, cups and storage jars with water, sometimes adding sand or ash to scrub away residue. The task is routine, handled while cleaning up after meals. Well-maintained vessels last for years. Neglected ones develop off flavours that taint every drink prepared in them. You pay particular attention to corners and narrow necks where residue can hide and create problems later. The sand you use for scrubbing is fine-grained and abrasive enough to remove stuck-on material without scratching the clay too severely. You scoop it damp from near the fountain, rubbing it around the interior of the vessel in firm circles. The gritty texture provides friction that loosens dried wine or honey. Afterward you rinse thoroughly, ensuring no sand remains to create grittiness in the next batch of drinks. Preparation happens in cycles tied to daily rhythms. You mix drinks in the morning for the day ahead. Mid-afternoon might call for fresh Bosca if the earlier batch is gone. Evening preparation is more deliberate, with time to warm wine, add spices, and let flavours meld while you finish other tasks. The rhythm becomes automatic, your body knowing when it's time to prepare the next round, without needing to consciously track time. Drinking together creates connection, without requiring elaborate ceremony. You sit with family after the evening meal, cups of diluted wine in hand, conversation drifting between the day's events and small observations. The drinks facilitate the gathering more than they define it. You sip slowly, refilling cups as needed from the communal crater. The vessel sits within easy reach, and people help themselves or pour for others as cups empty. The conversation flows around the drinking rather than being directed by it. Someone mentions a price change at the market. Another person describes an interaction with a difficult neighbour. You contribute your own observations about the day's work. The cups provide something to hold during pauses, something to do with your hands during moments when you're listening rather than speaking. The regular rhythm of sipping creates natural breaks in the conversation. Taverns offer a different kind of sharing. You enter after work, Finding familiar faces among strangers, the tavern keeper knows your usual order. You receive your cup and join others standing or seated on simple benches. Conversation happens in fragments. Someone mentions the weather. Another complains about rising grain prices. You add a comment or listen, both acceptable options. The drink gives your hand something to hold while you decide whether to engage. The tavern's social dynamic is informal and fluid. You can stand alone at the counter drinking in solitude while surrounded by people, or you can drift into conversation with whoever is nearby. The level of interaction is entirely up to you, determined by your mood and energy rather than social obligation. People respect the choice to remain quiet, not interpreting silence as unfriendliness. Shared cups appear in more intimate settings. When visiting a friend's home, you might drink from the same cup, passing it back and forth as you talk. The act signals trust and comfort. Each person drinks a measured amount before handing it to the other. The cup becomes a kind of conversation marker, creating natural pauses in speech. You hand it over, and the other person drinks while you finish your thought or take a breath before continuing. The practice of sharing a cup goes back to childhood friendships, when you had fewer possessions and sharing was necessary rather than symbolic. The habit continues into adulthood, carrying those associations of closeness and mutual regard. You don't share cups with everyone, only with people you know well enough that the intimacy feels appropriate rather than presumptuous. Work crews share large containers of posca during breaks. You gather in shade, each person using a communal ladle to fill their own cup or drinking directly in turn. The drink is egalitarian. Foremen drink the same posca as labourers. The shared container reinforces the temporary community formed by the task at hand. You stand together, drinking and resting, distinctions of role and authority temporarily softened by shared thirst and shared refreshment. The container is usually a large ceramic vessel, too heavy to pass around easily. It sits in a central location, and people approach it when ready to drink. The ladle is shared, dipped by different hands throughout the break. You don't think about hygiene in the way later societies will. The sharing is a normal, unremarkable part of collective life that prioritizes practicality over individual preference. Toasting exists, but is less formal than later traditions. You raise your cup towards someone before drinking, acknowledging them. The gesture is simple and usually wordless. It happens between friends reuniting, business partners finalizing agreements, or family members marking small celebrations. You drink after the acknowledgement, and the moment passes without fanfare. The toast isn't an announcement but a quiet recognition, meaningful to those involved without requiring an audience or elaboration. Religious observances include drink offerings, but these are poured out rather than consumed. You pour wine or milk onto an altar, or into the ground before a meal, honouring household gods or marking significant dates. The act is brief, integrated into daily routine rather than separated as a major ritual. After the offering, you continue with your meal and drinks normally. The gods receive their portion first, then human needs are addressed. The offering is usually small, just enough to demonstrate respect and remembrance. You don't waste large quantities, as the gods don't require excess to be honoured. A splash of wine darkens the stone altar, or disappears into the earth. You murmur a conventional phrase or simply make the gesture in silence. The practice is so familiar that you perform it almost automatically, though the intention behind it remains genuine. Marketplace vendors sell drinks to passers-by, creating mobile social points. You stop at a stall, request a cup of cooled wine or posca, and drink while watching the crowd. Other customers come and go. You might exchange a few words with the vendor or simply drink and leave. The interaction is transactional but not unfriendly. The vendor knows their regular customers, asks about family or work, remembers preferences, and adjusts drinks accordingly. Festivals bring larger gatherings and more generous drinking. You attend neighbourhood celebrations where wine flows more freely than usual. The drinks are still diluted and still consumed with food, but quantities increase. You see people becoming more animated and louder, but rarely out of control. The social pressure to maintain dignity remains even during festivities. You drink more than on an ordinary day, but the increase is moderate rather than dramatic. The festival atmosphere encourages generosity. People who normally guard their better wine bring it out to share. You taste varieties you couldn't afford to buy regularly. The sharing creates goodwill, strengthens neighbourhood bonds, and allows everyone to participate in celebration regardless of their usual means. You contribute what you can, whether that's your own wine or help with preparation and cleanup. Sharing drinks across social classes happens more fluidly than you might expect. A wealthy patron might offer wine to clients who visit seeking favours or employment. You accept the drink, understanding it as part of the social exchange. The wine quality might differ from what the patron serves his equals, but the gesture of offering remains meaningful. You drink gratefully, aware that the relationship is unequal, but also that small courtesies maintain the bonds that structure society. Seasonal drinks mark the year's progression and create shared experiences that transcend individual circumstances. During harvest, you drink new wine that's barely fermented, cloudy and sweet. Winter brings spiced, warmed wines. Spring sees fresh herb infusions. Summer demands cooler, lighter drinks. These patterns are shared knowledge, experienced by everyone regardless of status. You can discuss the qualities of this year's new wine with anyone, from slaves to senators, finding common ground in the shared experience. Gift-giving sometimes involves drinks. You bring a small amphora of decent wine when invited to dinner, offering it to your host. The gift acknowledges hospitality and contributes to the evening's supplies. Your host might open it immediately or save it, depending on what's already prepared. The choice is theirs, and you don't take offence either way. The gift has fulfilled its purpose in the offering. Drinking in public baths occurs in designated areas. You finish bathing and move to relaxation rooms where vendors sell wine and light snacks. You buy a cup, sitting on benches while your body adjusts to normal temperature. Other bathers do the same. Conversation is casual, bodies tired from heat and exercise. The combination of warmth, relaxation, and mild wine creates a pleasant drowsiness. You sip slowly, in no hurry to leave. The bath vendors know they have a captive audience of relaxed customers and price their drinks accordingly. You pay more than you would at a tavern, but the convenience and the context make it worthwhile. You're too relaxed to feel like walking elsewhere, and the drink complements the bathing experience perfectly. Children observe these customs, learning by watching. They see how adults mix drinks when refills are appropriate, and how to accept or decline offers. The education is informal but thorough. By the time they are old enough to drink wine regularly, the social patterns are deeply familiar. They know without being told how to participate in shared drinking, how to moderate consumption, and how to use drinks to facilitate social interaction. Refusing a drink is acceptable when done politely. You might be too full, not thirsty, or simply prefer not to drink at that moment. You decline with a small gesture, perhaps placing your hand briefly over your cup, and the offer isn't repeated insistently. The social fabric is secure enough to accommodate individual preference without interpretation as insult. Your host might ask once if you're certain, but accepts your refusal without pressing further. Midday heat drives you indoors or into shade, where drinking becomes part of a broader pause. You set down your tools or step away from your tasks, finding a cooler spot. Someone has prepared posca or diluted wine. You drink slowly, letting the liquid cool your throat. The break lasts long enough for your heart rate to settle, and for the immediate urgency of labour to fade. Your breathing returns to normal. Sweat dries on your skin, leaving salt residue that you'll wash away later. The shade you find might be under a colonnade, against a wall that hasn't yet absorbed the day's heat, or beneath an awning stretched over a work area. You lean against whatever support is available, grateful for the moment of stillness. Your muscles relax incrementally. The drink helps, but the rest itself is equally important. You close your eyes briefly, gathering strength for the afternoon's work. Construction sites grow quiet during the hottest hours. Workers cluster under awnings or lean against walls in shadow. You drink from a shared container, the posca sharp enough to cut through dust in your mouth. You don't talk much. The break is about recovery more than socialising. You drink, rest, and wait for the temperature to become bearable again. Some workers lie down completely, using bundles of cloth as pillows, catching brief sleep before resuming work. The site supervisor doesn't discourage these rest periods, understanding that pushing through extreme heat leads to accidents and injuries. Better to lose an hour to rest than to have someone collapse from heat exhaustion, or make a costly mistake due to fatigue. You finish your drink, set the cup aside, and find a comfortable position. The heat is visible, creating shimmering distortions in the air. You wait for it to pass. Agricultural workers follow similar patterns. You leave the fields when the sun is highest, gathering under trees or returning to farm buildings. Cups of water or light wine appear, distributed among the crew. You drink while sitting, your back against rough wood or stone. Sweat dries slowly. The drink replenishes what you've lost to heat and effort. Your hands are dirty from field work, but you drink anyway. Washing can wait until the day is done. The trees you gather under are old and spreading, planted generations ago specifically to provide shade during harvest. The earth beneath them is packed hard from years of workers sitting in the same spots. You find your preferred location almost unconsciously, settling into a groove that fits your body. The shade is noticeably cooler than the open field, perhaps only a few degrees, but enough to feel like relief. Workshops pause less formally than outdoor work sites. You work indoors, away from direct sun, but still need breaks. You keep a jug nearby, drinking whenever thirst strikes. The intervals vary based on the work. Hot tasks near furnaces or ovens require more frequent sips. Quieter work like weaving or accounting allows you to drink according to preference rather than necessity. You develop a rhythm, knowing without thinking when it's time for another cup. The workshop air is often thick with heat trapped under the roof, sometimes worse than being outside. But at least you're shielded from direct sun. You pause at your workbench, lifting the cup to your lips while still mentally engaged with the task ahead. The drink is quick and functional, allowing you to return to work without significant interruption. Afternoon drinking is purposeful rather than leisurely. You drink to continue functioning, to maintain focus through the remaining hours. The beverages are simple and quick to consume. You don't linger over them. The cup is empty and set aside, and you return to work when ready. The break is measured in minutes rather than longer periods. You take what you need and resume, knowing that proper rest will come in the evening. Markets slow during midday. Vendors retreat into shade behind their stalls. You see them drinking from clay cups, wiping sweat from their faces with cloth. Customers are scarce during this period. The vendors rest, drink, and wait for evening traffic to resume. The rhythm is universal enough that you notice when someone defies it, continuing to work through heat. Such dedication seems either admirable or foolish depending on circumstances. The market stalls themselves offer minimal shade, often just cloth stretched overhead. The vendors sit on stools or directly on the ground, their wares arranged in front of them. They drink slowly, making their supply last until business picks up again. Some vendors use the quiet time to prepare food for themselves, eating and drinking while waiting for customers to return. Household structure rests around meals and drinks. After the midday meal, you drink diluted wine while the household quiets. Children might nap. Adults sit in courtyards, handling small tasks that don't require heavy labour. The drinks make the transition from eating to resting smoother, occupying hands and mouth while energy settles. You feel pleasantly full, slightly drowsy, and content to sit quietly until the day's heat begins to wane. The courtyard might have a small fountain or plants that cool the air slightly. You sit where air movement is best. What little breeze exists finding its way to your location. The drink is cool at first, warming in your hand as you hold it. You sip intermittently, spacing out the consumption to extend the period of rest. Older people drink more frequently in smaller amounts throughout the day. You observe grandparents or aging neighbours sipping constantly, maintaining hydration without overtaxing digestion. They keep cups within reach, filling them as needed. The pattern is practical, adjusted to changing bodies that don't signal thirst as reliably as they once did. They drink preemptively, preventing discomfort rather than responding to it. Their cups are often smaller than those used by younger adults, appropriate for the reduced quantities they consume at once. They might drink a dozen small cups throughout the day, totaling the same amount a younger person would drink in 5 or 6 larger portions. The frequent drinking also gives them regular reasons to move, to stand and walk to the water source, maintaining activity that keeps aging bodies functional. Seasonal variations affect rest rhythms significantly. Summer demands longer, more frequent breaks with cooler drinks. You might stop working 3 or 4 times during the day seeking shade and liquid relief. Winter allows continuous work with warm beverage breaks spaced further apart. You can work for hours without feeling desperate for rest, though you still appreciate the breaks when they come. Spring and fall create moderate patterns, where drinking fits naturally into existing routines without special accommodation. Travel incorporates drinking into its rhythm in predictable ways. You walk for several hours, then pause to rest and drink from your flask. The break serves multiple purposes: hydration, rest for your feet, and a chance to check your route. You drink, stretch, and continue. The pattern repeats throughout the journey. Experienced travellers know where good water sources appear along common routes, planning their stops accordingly. The places where you stop often show signs of countless previous travellers doing the same. Stones arranged for sitting, ground worn smooth from many feet, and sometimes even shade structures built and maintained by no one in particular, but used by everyone. You rest in these spaces gratefully, sharing them briefly with other travellers before each of you continues your separate journeys. Taverns serve people at different points in their rest cycles. Some arrive exhausted, needing a drink before continuing home. Others stop at the beginning of leisure time, using the tavern as a transition space between work and evening. You adapt your drinking pace to your plans. Quick drinks for those continuing onward. Slower consumption for those settling in. The tavern keeper reads these signals, knowing who wants immediate service and who is happy to wait while nursing a single cup. Evening approaches, and the day's heat finally breaks. You drink cooler beverages again, celebrating the temperature shift. The relief is physical and immediate. You feel your body relaxing, tension from heat dissipating. The drink tastes better in this context, more refreshing than it did hours earlier. The same Posca or wine that barely satisfied at midday now feels perfectly suited to the moment. Preparation for rest begins with final drinks. You finish diluted wine with your evening meal, the last substantial drinking before sleep. The amount is moderate, enough to complement food without causing discomfort later. You know from experience how much you can drink and still sleep well. The knowledge comes from years of trial and adjustment, learning your own limits and preferences. Grapes grow abundantly in Italian soil, providing the foundation for most drinks. You see vineyards covering hillsides, vines trained on stakes, or vines allowed to climb trees in the traditional manner. Different grape varieties produce different wine characteristics, though most end up mixed with water anyway, which moderates the distinctions. The abundance means wine is accessible to nearly everyone, with quality varying by price rather than availability. The grape harvest is a defining period each autumn. You see whole communities involved in the work, gathering fruit at peak ripeness. The grapes are crushed by foot in large vats, juice flowing through channels into collection vessels. The work is hard but social, accompanied by conversation and occasional songs. Even if you don't work in the vineyards yourself, you are aware of the harvest as it happens, seeing the increased activity and smelling the sweet scent of crushed grapes that fills the air. Different growing regions produce recognizably different wines. Grapes from volcanic soil near Vesuvius have distinctive mineral qualities. Coastal vineyards produce lighter wines with subtle salt notes from sea spray. Mountain grapes create more structured, acidic wines. You develop preferences based on experience, learning which regional styles you enjoy most. Honey arrives from local beekeepers and distant suppliers. Roman honey comes from bees feeding on thyme, rosemary and wildflowers. The flavour varies by region and season. Spring honey tastes lighter and more floral. Late summer honey is darker and more intense. You buy it in clay jars, checking consistency and aroma before purchase. Good honey dissolves smoothly in warm water. Poor quality honey contains wax particles or crystals that never fully incorporate. The honey market operates through direct sales from beekeepers and through merchants who aggregate honey from multiple sources. You can buy directly if you live near beekeeping areas, getting fresher product at better prices. In the city, you rely on merchants who add their own profit margin but offer convenience and variety. You learn to judge honey quality by colour, viscosity and smell, developing expertise that helps you avoid paying premium prices for inferior products. Spices travel far to reach Roman markets. Pepper comes from India, transported along trade routes that span months. The expense makes it a luxury ingredient, added to drinks in small pinches. The peppercorns are small, hard and wrinkled, and dark brown to black in colour. You grind them as needed, preferring freshly ground pepper to pre-ground versions that lose potency. Cinnamon arrives from even more distant sources, bark rolled and dried for the journey. You use it sparingly, aware of the cost and the distance it travelled. The spice merchants who sell these products are often among the wealthiest traders, their profit margins justified by the risks and distances involved in procurement. You watch them carefully measure out small quantities, weighing them on delicate scales to ensure precise amounts. A few grams of pepper might cost as much as several jugs of ordinary wine. You make your purchase, tucking the precious spice safely away for special occasions. Ginger appears in preserved form, the root dried and hard. You grate or pound it before use, releasing sharp, warming flavours. The spice works well in winter drinks, adding heat that complements actual warmth from braziers. You store it carefully, protecting it from moisture that would cause decay. The dried root can last for months or even years if properly maintained, slowly darkening and intensifying in flavour over time. Local herbs grow wild or in gardens, free for the gathering. Mint spreads easily, and you harvest it throughout the growing season. The leaves bruise easily, releasing oils. You add fresh mint to cold drinks and dried mint to warm ones. The fresh version provides bright, immediate flavour. Dried mint is more concentrated and less vibrant, but perfectly suitable for most purposes. Oregano, thyme, and marjoram grow nearby as well, each contributing different flavour notes when steeped in wine or water. You collect herbs yourself when possible, recognising the plants in fields and waste areas around the city. The knowledge of which plants are useful and which are merely weeds is passed down through families. You learn from parents or neighbours, absorbing information through participation rather than formal instruction. The herbs cost nothing but your time to collect and dry them. Rose petals come from garden roses, picked in the morning when oils are strongest. You dry them in shade, preserving colour and fragrance. The dried petals infuse wine with subtle floral notes. Too many petals make the drink perfumed and unpleasant, tasting more like cosmetics than a beverage. You learn the right proportion through trial and adjustment. A few petals per cup is usually sufficient, creating gentle floral undertones rather than overwhelming rose flavour. The roses grown for petals are different from ornamental varieties, selected over time for their flavour and fragrance rather than just appearance. You know which gardens have the best roses for this purpose, sometimes trading other goods for permission to collect petals during peak season. The dried petals are stored in sealed containers that protect them from moisture and light. Fruit availability follows seasonal patterns that everyone knows. Grapes are abundant in autumn, fresh and sweet. You eat them whole, press them for juice, or dry them into raisins for later use. Pomegranates appear in late fall, their seeds providing both juice and visual interest in drinks. The fruit is labour-intensive to process, but the flavour justifies the effort. Quinces require cooking to become palatable, but their flavour infuses well into wine, creating complex aromatic drinks. Citrus fruits grow in southern regions, arriving in markets when trade permits. Lemons and citrons are valued for their juice, which adds bright acidity to drinks. The fruits are expensive due to limited supply and transport costs. You use them sparingly, a few drops of juice adding significant impact. The rinds can also be dried and used for flavouring, adding bitter aromatic qualities. Dates come from North Africa and eastern provinces. The dried fruits are sweet enough to flavour drinks without added honey. You chop them finely, steeping them in wine until the flesh softens and the liquid takes on caramel notes. The spent fruit is still edible, though wine-soaked and soft. Some people enjoy eating it as a treat. Others discard it, having extracted the desirable flavours into the liquid. The date trade is extensive and well established, with regular shipments arriving by sea. You buy dates in various grades, from premium large fruits to smaller, less expensive options that work perfectly well for drink flavouring, even if they're not beautiful enough to serve whole. The dates keep for months, making them reliable ingredients year-round. Nuts occasionally flavour drinks, particularly almonds. You grind them into paste, mixing the paste with water to create a milky drink. The process is labour-intensive but produces a rich, slightly sweet beverage enjoyed cold. The drink is filling enough to serve as a light meal. The grinding requires significant effort with a mortar and pestle, breaking down the nuts into fine particles that suspend in the liquid. Almond milk prepared this way is different from the thin, clear almond-flavoured water some cooks make. The genuine version is creamy and opaque, substantial in both texture and flavour. You strain out the larger particles before drinking, leaving a smooth liquid that coats your mouth and throat. Salt appears in some drink preparations, particularly those intended to restore balance after heavy sweating. You add a pinch to posca or water, just enough to replace what your body has lost. The amount is subtle, detected only as a slight enhancement of other flavours rather than distinct saltiness. Too much salt ruins the drink, making it unpalatable. You add conservatively, tasting and adjusting. Barley and other grains become drinks in regions where they're plentiful. You sprout, dry and grind the grain, then mix it with water and allow fermentation. The resulting beverage is cloudy, mildly alcoholic and filling. It appears more often in provinces than in Rome itself, where wine is so abundant that grain-based drinks seem unnecessary. The flavour is earthy and bread-like, quite different from wine's fruity qualities. Milk, when used in drinks, comes from goats and sheep grazing on local pastures. The animal's diet affects milk flavour significantly. Spring milk, when animals eat fresh grass and flowers, tastes different from winter milk when they consume stored hay. You drink it fresh, or mix it with wine for medicinal purposes. The combination of wine and milk sounds strange, but has an established place in medical treatments for certain conditions. Vinegar, essential for posca, is made from wine that has soured. Rather than waste spoiled wine, you convert it deliberately into acetum. The process requires exposure to air and time. You keep partially filled vessels in warm spots, checking progress over weeks. The acetum continues to develop complexity as it ages, becoming smoother and more balanced. Young vinegar is sharp and harsh. Well-aged vinegar has depth and roundness. You can purchase vinegar already made, but many households produce their own from wine that has begun to sour. The conversion is inevitable if wine is exposed to air and warmth. You simply guide the process rather than fight it, accepting the transformation and making use of the result. Water quality varies by source in ways that affect the final drinks you make. Aqueduct water is generally clean and fresh, coming from protected mountain sources. Well, water tastes different depending on the surrounding soil and minerals it passes through. Spring water is prized for its coolness and purity. You develop preferences based on taste, but mostly you drink whatever is available and safe. The water used for mixing drinks affects their final flavour. though the effect is subtle when wine or other strong flavours dominate. Trade routes bring exotic ingredients to those who can afford them. Saffron threads from the East add colour and subtle flavour to special drinks. Cardamom pods, though rare, appear in wealthy households. These ingredients mark status as much as they improve taste. You might encounter them at festivals or when visiting prosperous homes. The flavours are novel and interesting, but not necessarily superior to local herbs you know well. The merchants who trade in these rarities cultivate mystique around their products, telling stories of distant origins and difficult procurement. Some of the stories are true, others are exaggerated for effect. You appreciate the flavours when you encounter them, but don't pine for ingredients you can't regularly afford. Preservation techniques extend ingredient availability throughout the year. You dry herbs and fruits during abundance, storing them in sealed containers for winter use. Honey acts as a preservative when added to fruit mixtures. Vinegar prevents spoilage in some preparations. The knowledge of preservation is practical wisdom, passed through generations. You learn what works through observation and experiment, adding your own discoveries to the collective knowledge. The working day ends gradually rather than all at once. You finish tasks, clean tools, and begin transitioning toward evening. Drinking shifts from functional hydration to relaxed consumption. You prepare wine with more care now, adding herbs or warming it if the weather is cool. The pace slows. You're no longer drinking to power through work, but to mark the transition into rest. The light changes as evening approaches, becoming golden and warm rather than the harsh white of midday. Shadows lengthen. The air temperature drops slightly, enough to feel pleasant rather than oppressive. You notice these changes in your body, feeling tension release from your shoulders and back. The drink you prepare reflects this shift, chosen for pleasure rather than pure utility. Family gathers after work, drawn together by the approaching meal and the natural end of daily obligations. You mix drinks for everyone, adjusting strength and flavour to individual preferences. Children receive highly diluted wine. Adults choose their ratios. The preparation is part of settling in, a ritual that marks the boundary between work and rest. You take your time with the mixing, not rushing, enjoying the process as much as the eventual consumption. The family members arrive in sequence, not all at once. Someone finishes work and appears first. Others join gradually. You greet each person, offering them a drink as they settle in. The gathering accumulates naturally rather than being formally convened. Eventually everyone is present, and the evening can properly begin. Conversation during evening drinking is unhurried. You discuss the day's events without urgency or agenda. Someone mentions a neighbour's news. Another describes something seen in the market. You contribute when you have something to add and listen when you don't. The drinks last longer than daytime portions, sipped between exchanges. You might hold the same cup for an hour, refilling it once or twice but never rushing through the contents. The topics of conversation drift from practical matters to more abstract discussions. You talk about plans for upcoming days, repairs needed around the home, and children's progress in their apprenticeships or education. The conversation requires no particular outcome, existing for its own sake rather than to solve problems or make decisions. Courtyards fill with evening light, softer and warmer than midday glare. You sit on benches or stools, cups in hand. The temperature becomes pleasant. You feel your muscles relaxing, tension from labour gradually releasing. The drink is part of this unwinding, but not the sole cause. Time itself creates the transition. Your body knows this is a rest period, responding to environmental cues and learned patterns. The courtyard might have plants growing in containers, herbs, or small trees that provide greenery. Birds settle in for the night, their calls becoming less frequent as darkness approaches. You sit in this peaceful space, grateful for the day's end, not thinking much beyond the present moment. Taverns grow busier as evening progresses. You enter to find more people than during the day, workers finished with their tasks and seeking company. The noise level rises without becoming chaotic. Multiple conversations overlap. You find space at a counter or table, Order your drink and become part of the collective atmosphere. The tavern keeper moves efficiently, serving multiple customers, remembering orders, and collecting payment. The evening tavern crowd is different from the midday visitors. People are more relaxed and less focused on quick consumption and returning to work. You see groups of friends gathering, colleagues from the same work site sharing stories from the day. The atmosphere is warmer and more convivial, though still maintaining the casual informality that defines tavern culture. Some evenings you stay home, content with your own company or that of immediate family. You drink while handling small domestic tasks, mending clothes, organising supplies, or simply sitting. The beverage gives you something to do with your hands, a reason to pause periodically. The tasks are unhurried, accomplished in the gentle pace that evening allows. Neighbours might visit, appearing at your door as evening settles. You invite them in, offer drinks, and sit together. The visits are informal and unplanned. You talk about shared concerns, repairs needed in the building, upcoming festivals, and changes in the neighbourhood. The drinks facilitate without dominating the interaction. You pour, they accept, and the cups become props in the larger social exchange. These neighbourly visits follow patterns you've learned over years of living in close proximity. You know who might stop by on which evenings, who enjoys conversation, and who prefers brief exchanges. The relationships are comfortable, built on regular interaction rather than deep emotional connection, but valuable nonetheless. Music sometimes accompanies evening drinking in public spaces. A musician plays simple melodies on a flute or stringed instrument. The music isn't a performance so much as a background presence. You listen while drinking, or you don't. The choice is yours. The music continues regardless. The musician appreciates coins tossed into a bowl but doesn't demand payment. The music improves the atmosphere, making the space more pleasant for everyone. Food pairs with evening drinks, though meals are finished. You nibble on olives, bread, or dried fruit while sipping wine. The combination of food and drink extends the evening, creating a buffer zone between the day's work and eventual sleep. You're not particularly hungry, but eating anyway, maintaining social rhythm. The small bites keep your stomach occupied, preventing the wine from feeling too strong on an empty stomach. Wealthier households have more elaborate evening arrangements. You might attend a dinner where drinks are served in specific orders. Mulsum first, then various wines, and finally a digestive drink spiced with herbs. The structure creates its own rhythm. You move through the progression, each drink marking a phase of the evening. The host has planned these transitions, creating an experience rather than just providing refreshment. At such dinners, you recline on couches rather than sitting on chairs, the traditional Roman posture for formal dining. The cups are more decorative, sometimes metal rather than simple clay. Servants mix and serve the drinks rather than people helping themselves. The formality creates distance from everyday drinking, making it special occasion behaviour. Street corners become informal gathering points in good weather. You stand with others, drinks purchased from nearby vendors. The gathering is temporary and fluid. People arrive and leave. Conversation shifts with the changing group. You stay as long as you want, then continue home when ready. The informal nature means you can participate without commitment, leaving when you choose without explanation. Gambling accompanies some evening drinking. You watch others play dice or simple board games, small wagers changing hands. The stakes are modest, the games are social rather than serious. You might participate or simply observe, drink in hand either way. The games give structure to time spent together, providing focus for conversation and friendly competition. Light fades gradually through the evening. You continue drinking as dusk deepens, though you might switch to water or stop altogether. The approaching darkness creates natural endpoints. People begin mentioning the need to get home to prepare for the next day. The gathering disperses slowly without abrupt conclusions. You say your farewells, finish your cup, and begin the short walk home. Some evenings are quieter than others. You drink alone or with one companion, conversation minimal. The comfort comes from shared presence rather than interaction. You sit in comfortable silence, sipping occasionally, watching the day end. The silence isn't awkward but peaceful, each person lost in their own thoughts while still connected by proximity. Weather affects evening patterns significantly. Rain keeps you indoors, creating cozier gatherings in enclosed spaces. The sound of rain provides background rhythm to conversation. Clear nights might draw you outside, where cooler air makes drinking more refreshing. You adapt to conditions without complaint, finding appropriate spaces and drinks for each situation. The flexibility is learned, an acceptance that weather dictates some choices while leaving others to personal preference. Final drinks of the day are often water, clearing your palate and providing hydration for the night ahead. You drink a cup or two after your last meal, rinsing away the taste of wine and food. The water is simple, unadorned, and purely functional. You drink it standing in your kitchen or courtyard, the act quick and practical. The coolness of the water is pleasant after the day's various beverages, providing a clean finish. The water you choose for this final drink might come from a specific source you found that produces the cleanest, most refreshing taste. You prefer it to other available options, though the difference is subtle. The preference is personal, not based on objective quality measures, but on your own experience and associations. Cups and vessels from the day require cleaning before sleep. You rinse them in a basin, scrubbing away residue with your fingers or a cloth. The task is routine, mindless enough that your thoughts wander while your hands work. Clean vessels are arranged to dry, ready for tomorrow's first drinks. The cleaning is thorough without being obsessive, removing visible dirt and preventing build-up that would cause problems later. The basin water becomes cloudy as you work through multiple vessels. You might change it once or twice, depending on how many items need cleaning. The used water is tossed into the street drain or onto plants that can use the moisture. Nothing is wasted unnecessarily. Storage containers need checking before bed. You ensure wine amphorae are properly sealed and that nothing has been left open to spoil. You cover the posca jug if any remains for tomorrow. The crater is emptied and wiped clean. These small acts of maintenance prevent waste and ensure morning drinks are fresh. The habits are so ingrained that you perform them automatically, barely thinking about the actions. Some people prepare drinks for the following day before sleep. You might mix a large batch of posca, knowing you'll want it ready when work begins. The preparation takes only minutes but saves time in the morning rush. You cover the vessel and set it aside, satisfied with the planning. The future-oriented thinking is practical, making tomorrow slightly easier through small efforts today. Children are given final sips of water if they wake thirsty during the night. You keep a small jug near the sleeping area for this purpose. The nighttime drinks are brief, just enough to ease dry throats. Children settle back to sleep quickly, the interruption minor. You attend to them half asleep yourself, the routine so familiar it requires minimal consciousness. Elderly household members might need drinks during the night more frequently. You ensure water is within their reach and easy to find in darkness. The consideration is practical, born of understanding that bodies change with age and that dignity includes independence in small matters like drinking when thirsty. You place the vessel where they can reach it without standing, minimizing the risk of falls or confusion in darkness. Some evenings you drink a calming herbal infusion before bed. You prepare it with warm water and herbs known for gentle properties, chamomile flowers, lavender, or lemon balm. The drink is soothing without being medicinal, comforting rather than curative. You sip it slowly, letting warmth spread through your chest. The ritual signals the day's end to your body and mind, creating a transition between activity and sleep. The herbs for these bedtime drinks are ones you've collected and dried yourself or purchased from vendors who specialize in such things. You keep them in small containers, protected from moisture and light. The preparation is simple. Hot water poured over a pinch of dried herbs, allowed to steep until the water takes on colour and flavour, then strained and drunk while still warm. Cleanup extends beyond vessels to the spaces where drinking occurred. You wipe tables or counters and sweep floors if spills happen. The tidying creates order, preparing spaces for tomorrow's activities. You work efficiently, ready for rest, but unwilling to leave disorder behind. The clean spaces greet you in the morning, making the start of the day slightly more pleasant. Winter nights might see you warming a final cup of spiced wine, drinking it while sitting near fading coals in a brazier. The warmth counteracts the chill that settles as night deepens. You drink slowly, reluctant to leave the heat for cold, sleeping quarters. The drink provides comfort and a reason to delay the transition to bed. The spices warm you from inside while the brazier warms your exterior, creating complete comfort. You watch the coals dim as you drink, seeing them shift from red to orange to grey. The heat decreases gradually, matching your decreasing alertness. By the time your cup is empty, the coals are nearly out and you're ready for sleep. Summer nights require different approaches. You drink cool water before sleep, knowing heat will make you thirsty later. You might set a cup within reach of your sleeping mat, anticipating need without wanting to fully wake later. The planning is automatic, learned from previous summers when you woke parched and had to fumble in darkness for water. Better to prepare while still alert. Tavern keepers close their establishments as night deepens, cleaning as they go. You finish your last cup, pay what you owe, and leave them to their work. The streets are quieter now. Most people are already home. You walk through darkness, familiar with the route. The day's final drinks are behind you. You think vaguely about tomorrow, but mainly focus on navigating home safely in limited light. The tavern keeper might nod farewell as you leave, already turning to the next task. The relationship is professional but friendly, built on regular patronage. You'll see them again tomorrow or the next day, continuing the pattern that structures both your lives. Home again, you complete final preparations for sleep. You check that everything is secure, that fire hazards are eliminated, and that tomorrow's needs are anticipated. Among these tasks, ensuring drinking water is available stands equal with other practical concerns. You place vessels where you'll find them easily in the morning, in their customary locations where your hand will reach automatically even before full wakefulness. Some nights you're too tired for elaborate routines. You drink water hastily, rinse your cup, and head straight to bed. The routine compresses without disappearing entirely. Even exhausted, you attend to basic needs. The drinks are shorter, the clean-up faster, but the pattern remains. Your body knows what it needs even when your mind is too tired to consciously plan. You settle onto your sleeping mat or bed, the surface familiar beneath you. Darkness is complete now, or nearly so, with perhaps a bit of moonlight or distant lamplight providing minimal illumination. You hear neighbours doing the same, the sounds of a district preparing for sleep. Your thirst is quenched. Your body is tired from the day's work. The drinks you consumed throughout the day have served their purposes: hydration, refreshment, social connection, and comfort. The sounds of the neighbourhood settling are comforting in their familiarity. Shutters closing, voices calling final good nights, doors being secured, animals making their nighttime noises, water being poured, cups being set down, all the small sounds of people completing their evening routines. Sleep comes gradually rather than immediately. Your thoughts drift without direction or urgency. You might recall a particularly good drink you had, or notice that you need to buy more honey tomorrow. These small considerations fade as sleep approaches. Your breathing deepens and slows. The day releases its hold. Rest takes over completely. Morning returns, and with it the same patterns you followed for years. You wake, drink water to ease the night's dryness, and begin preparing drinks for the day ahead. The repetition is comforting rather than monotonous. You know what needs doing. Your hands move through familiar motions without requiring conscious direction. The cup goes to the water jug, the water pours, and you drink. The simplicity is satisfying. The morning water tastes particularly good, your body receptive after hours without liquid. You drink deeply, feeling the cool water travel down your throat and into your stomach. You feel more alert almost immediately, the hydration clearing some of the fog of sleep. Across Rome, thousands of people begin similar routines simultaneously. Vessels are filled from fountains and wells, wine is mixed with water, Posca is prepared for workers heading to sites and fields. The drinks are ordinary, beneath notice except in their absence. You participate in this city-wide rhythm without thinking about the collective nature of the act. Yet if you could see all of Rome at once, you'd observe this synchrony, everyone drinking at roughly the same times in roughly the same ways. Seasons cycle and drinking habits shift accordingly, but the underlying patterns remain constant. Winter drinks are warmed, summer drinks are cooled, spring and autumn require less adjustment. The variations work within an established framework rather than disrupting it. You've seen these cycles many times, you'll see them again. The predictability is reassuring, providing structure to the passing year. You remember winters when you were younger, learning to warm wine properly without scorching it. You remember summers when you discovered which fountain provided the coolest water. These memories accumulate, creating a personal history of drinking that mirrors the larger cultural patterns. Children grow into adults, learning to mix and share drinks the way they watched others do. The knowledge transfers through observation and practice. No formal instruction is needed. You simply do what you've seen done, adjusting to your own preferences while maintaining the basic customs. A child who watches her parents mix Posca every morning will know how to do it herself when the time comes, even without explicit teaching. You see this transmission happening constantly. A young boy carefully pouring water into wine under his father's watchful eye. A girl learning which herbs to add to warm wine by watching her mother. The education is gradual and gentle, integrated into daily life rather than separated as formal lessons. Trade continues bringing new ingredients, but core drinks remain unchanged. Posca is still Posca whether you add imported spices or local herbs. Diluted wine tastes familiar even when the wine itself comes from a new region. The foundation is stable enough to accommodate variation without losing identity. A merchant who travels to distant provinces and returns with exotic spices will still prepare his morning Posca the same way his grandfather did. Buildings age and are rebuilt. Neighbourhoods change composition. Empires expand and contract. Through all of this, people keep mixing water with wine, preparing Posca for hot days, and warming spiced wine for cold evenings. The drinks anchor daily life, providing continuity that outlasts individual circumstances. The buildings where you drink might be torn down and replaced, but the drinks themselves persist. You think about the tavern you frequented as a young person, now replaced by a different building housing a different business. But the tavern that replaced it serves essentially the same drinks to people with essentially the same needs. The faces change, but the patterns continue. You don't think about legacy when you drink. You're focused on immediate needs, thirst, heat, and the desire for a pause. Yet the accumulated effect of millions of such moments creates culture. The way Romans drink becomes part of what it means to be Roman, even when no one articulates this explicitly. Future historians might study grand architectural achievements or military campaigns, but your daily drinks are equally defining of Roman life. Written recipes exist for fancy drinks, preserved by wealthy households or recorded by scholars, but most drinking knowledge lives in practice rather than text. You know how to mix Posca because you've done it countless times, because you learned by watching, and because the knowledge is embedded in routine. If someone asked you to write down exact measurements and procedures, you'd struggle. But you can make perfect Posca without thinking. This practical knowledge is more reliable than written recipes in some ways. It adapts to available ingredients, to individual preferences, and to changing circumstances. A recipe is fixed. Practiced knowledge is flexible, responsive, and alive. Future generations will drink differently. They'll have access to different ingredients and different technologies for cooling and preserving, but they'll still need hydration. They'll still pause during heat. They'll still drink together as a form of connection. The specifics change. The underlying needs persist. You can't imagine what future drinks might be like, but you know they'll serve the same fundamental purposes. You finish your morning drink, already thinking about the day ahead. Work awaits. Tasks need completing. Throughout it all you'll pause to drink. Water, Posca, diluted wine, or whatever suits the moment. The drinks will be unremarkable, exactly as they should be. You don't want your drinks to be remarkable. You want them to be reliable, available, and appropriate. Routine has value that transcends novelty. The drinks you consume are the same drinks consumed yesterday and will be consumed tomorrow. This consistency provides structure, creates shared experience, and allows you to focus on other aspects of life without worrying about basic needs. You don't have to decide what to drink each time you're thirsty. The choice is largely predetermined by time of day, weather, and activity. Rome grows and changes around you in visible ways. New aqueducts bring more water to more neighbourhoods. Trade expands, introducing new flavours and ingredients from conquered territories. Fashion shift in elite circles, with wealthy Romans adopting different drinking customs for special occasions. But in homes, workshops and taverns, people keep drinking in ways their grandparents would recognise. The continuity is quiet, almost invisible, yet it shapes daily life as profoundly as any dramatic change. The new aqueduct that opened last year brought celebration and attention, but the daily use of that water is unremarkable, just an extension of patterns that preceded it. The infrastructure changes, the habits remain. You set down your empty cup ready to begin the day. The drink has served its purpose. You're hydrated, alert, and prepared for what comes next. The cup will be used again later, and again after that, for days and months and years. This simple object participates in the rhythm of your life, a small constant in a changing world. The cup is clay, unremarkable, and probably made by one of hundreds of potters working in Rome. But it's your cup, recognisable by a small chip on the rim, fitting your hand perfectly. The sun climbs higher in the sky. Heat builds gradually, the cool morning air warming with each passing hour. Soon you'll want another drink. The pattern continues, reliable as seasons, as fundamental as breathing. You take comfort in this continuity, even if you don't name it as such. The drinks are simply there, part of the fabric of days, quietly sustaining life in ancient Rome. You step into the street, joining others beginning their day. Someone calls a greeting. You respond briefly, continuing toward your destination. Your mind is already engaged with the work ahead, but part of you notes the fountain you'll pass, the possibility of refreshment when needed. The knowledge is automatic, a background awareness that doesn't require active thought. The day unfolds in familiar patterns. You work, you pause, you drink, and you continue. The drinks mark time without announcing themselves. They're present in every hour, supporting activity without becoming the focus of it. This is as it should be. The best drinks are the ones you barely notice, the ones that simply work. Evening will come, bringing its own drinking rhythms. Night will follow, with final cups and preparations for sleep. Tomorrow will begin the cycle again. The pattern repeats indefinitely, as long as you live, as long as Rome stands, and as long as people need water and seek comfort in shared cups. The drinks of Rome are unremarkable and essential, simple and nuanced, and individual and communal. They exist in the background of life, supporting everything else that happens. You drink without thinking much about it, and in that thoughtlessness is a kind of perfection. The drinks work, they sustain, they continue. Welcome to medieval Europe, where life unfolds slowly across seasons and generations. You're settling into a time when most people live their entire lives within a day's walk of where they were born, and rumours travel faster than certainty ever could. Power exists somewhere distant, operating through systems most will never fully see. You wake before dawn because that's simply what people do. The rhythm hasn't changed in living memory. Your grandfather woke this early, and his grandfather before him. Light comes gradually through shuttered windows, and you dress in layers that smell faintly of wood smoke and wear. Outside, the village looks much as it did yesterday. Thatched roofs sit heavy with morning dampness. Chickens peck near doorways. Someone's already started a fire, and thin smoke rises straight up in the still air. You can hear a cow lowing from the common pasture and the soft clatter of a wooden bucket against stone. Most of your day involves repetition. You tend animals or work the strips of land your family has farmed for generations. Your hands know the feel of rope, dirt, grain, and wood better than anything else. The work follows patterns set by the season and the weather, not by choice or innovation. The church bell rings at intervals, marking the hours of prayer, even if you can't always stop to observe them properly. The sound carries across fields and reminds you that time continues, measured and steady. You know the priest keeps records somewhere, written on parchment you've never touched, in letters you wouldn't recognise. Trade happens in the village square on market days. People bring eggs, cloth, vegetables, or tools. Coins change hands sometimes, but more often you exchange goods directly. A length of rope for 3 loaves of bread, wool for candles. The transactions happen face to face, with neighbours you've known since childhood. Authority exists, but at a distance. The lord who owns much of this land lives in a manor house you've passed but never entered. His steward comes through periodically to collect taxes or settle disputes. You pay what's owed in grain or labour, recorded in a ledger you'll never see. The system operates above your daily concerns. News arrives slowly and often second-hand. A traveller mentions something happening 2 valleys over. A merchant repeats a story heard at another market. You file these fragments away without much ability to verify them. Geography limits knowledge just as much as literacy does. Your children help with chores as soon as they're able. They learn by watching and doing, not through formal instruction. The oldest remembers to check the hen house. The youngest carries water from the well. These tasks will define their days just as similar tasks defined yours. Nearby, a monastery operates on its own schedule. Monks rise even earlier than you do, their days structured around prayer and work. They copy manuscripts, tend gardens, and maintain the only library for many miles. You know they possess knowledge, but it remains largely separate from your daily needs. The village itself rarely changes. Houses stand where they've stood for decades. Paths follow the same routes between homes, fields, and common areas. When something does shift, like a new family moving in, or an old building needing repair, it becomes a topic of conversation for weeks. You eat porridge in the morning and bread with whatever else is available later in the day. Meals depend entirely on the season and the harvest. In winter, you rely on stored grain and preserved vegetables. In summer, there's more variety, but also more work required to prepare for the next winter. The rhythm continues regardless of what might be happening elsewhere. Kings could be plotting, bishops could be scheming, but here the cows still need milking, and the grain still needs grinding. Your world operates on a scale measured in footsteps and familiar faces. Records exist in quantities most people never imagine. Scribes sit in dim rooms throughout the realm, copying agreements, lists, and correspondence. Their handwriting fills parchment page after parchment page, creating an archive of obligations and arrangements. These documents travel in leather cases, carried by messengers who know specific routes between manors, monasteries, and administrative centres. A letter might take weeks to reach its destination, following roads that turn to mud in spring and freeze solid in winter. The messenger memorises the route and carries the seal that proves authenticity. Seals matter enormously. Wax impressed with a signet ring transforms a piece of parchment into something official. The mark represents authority in physical form. Clerks verify these impressions carefully, checking the design against known examples. A forged seal means a forged document, and the consequences follow accordingly. Oaths bind people together across distances. A vassal swears loyalty to a lord in a ceremony witnessed by others. The words get recorded. The relationship becomes formal and documented. These verbal agreements, once written down, create networks of obligation that extend across entire regions. You're connected to this system, even if you never see most of it. The grain you harvest gets tallied. The labour you provide gets noted. Somewhere, in a ledger kept by someone you've never met, your contributions appear as lines of text. The administration operates quietly and continuously. Monasteries function as information centres. Monks correspond with other monasteries, sharing news and documents. They maintain copies of important texts and legal precedents. When disputes arise, these records provide evidence that can settle questions about land ownership or historical agreements. Some information travels through official channels only. A king issues a decree that gets copied and distributed to regional authorities. Each copy carries the royal seal. Local officials read these documents aloud in public spaces, translating policy into something the population can hear and theoretically understand. But other information moves through informal networks. A bishop's secretary mentions something to a travelling merchant. That merchant repeats the story at an inn. Someone overhearing it carries the tale to another town. By the time the information circles back, it may have changed considerably, but it still circulates. Meetings happen behind closed doors. Lords and bishops and administrators gather in private chambers to discuss matters that will eventually affect thousands of people. These conversations leave no records in the moment, though their outcomes often do. A new tax appears, a marriage alliance forms, territory changes hands. Clerks develop shorthand systems that let them record discussions quickly. They take notes during meetings, then expand them into proper documents later. This process introduces small opportunities for adjustment or interpretation, where emphasis can shift slightly without anyone noticing immediately. Messages sometimes travel in code. A sender and recipient agree on substitutions for sensitive words. Names become numbers. Locations get described indirectly. The letter appears innocent if intercepted, but means something quite specific to the intended reader. This practice exists alongside open correspondence, adding layers to written communication. Physical access controls information too. Certain rooms require permission to enter. Specific chests remain locked, their keys held by trusted individuals. Documents stay in designated locations, consulted only when necessary and under supervision. The architecture of information storage creates natural barriers. Trust gets distributed carefully. A lord relies on a steward to manage daily affairs. The steward trusts certain clerks with sensitive tasks. Those clerks work with scribes who copy documents without necessarily understanding their full meaning. Each level knows what it needs to know and rarely more. Sometimes arrangements remain deliberately vague. Two parties agree to cooperate without specifying exact terms in writing. This flexibility allows adaptation, but also creates space for disagreement later. When disputes arise, witnesses must recall conversations that happened months or years earlier, with memory serving as the only record. The system functions through repetition and routine. The same messengers follow the same routes. The same clerks perform the same tasks. Annual cycles of tax collection, legal reviews, and administrative reporting create predictable patterns. Within this regularity, variations can easily go unnoticed until much later. Stories circulate constantly through medieval communities. You hear them at the well, in the market, after church, and while working side by side in the fields. Most begin with someone claiming to have heard something from someone else, who supposedly witnessed or learned about an event. A typical rumour might sound simple at first. Someone mentions that a neighbouring lord seems to be hiring more guards than usual. This observation passes from person to person, each retelling adding small details or interpretations. By the time the story reaches you, it might include speculation about why the guards are needed, or what they might be protecting. Repetition gives these stories weight. When you hear the same tale from 3 different sources, it begins to feel reliable even without direct evidence. The human mind naturally seeks patterns and connections, so separate fragments of information start forming into coherent narratives whether or not they actually belong together. Markets serve as major exchange points for news. Merchants arriving from different directions bring stories from their travels. These accounts get shared while transactions happen, spreading to everyone within earshot. A piece of gossip from one town mixes with unrelated news from another, creating hybrid stories that take on lives of their own. Religious spaces generate their own information networks. People gather for services, pilgrimages, and feast days. During these events, conversation flows naturally. Someone mentions seeing unusual activity near a monastery. Another person recalls hearing about a bishop making unexpected visits. These fragments get woven together through casual discussion. Literacy remains rare enough that written information feels inherently more authoritative. If someone claims to have seen a document or heard a letter read aloud, their account carries extra credibility. Most listeners can't verify the contents themselves, so they accept the description at face value. Seasonal rhythms affect how stories spread. During harvest, people work long hours with less time for extended conversation. In winter, when darkness comes early and outdoor work diminishes, there's more opportunity to sit together and share tales. Some rumours circulate slowly for months before reaching certain communities. Travellers always attract attention and questions. A pilgrim passing through gets asked about conditions on the road and news from other regions. Their answers get remembered and repeated, even if the traveller themselves was just passing along rumours they heard elsewhere. Information chains extend across vast distances this way. Misunderstandings happen constantly. Someone overhears part of a conversation and fills in the missing pieces incorrectly. A gesture or expression gets misinterpreted. A name gets confused with a similar name. These small errors compound as stories pass from person to person, sometimes creating entirely new versions of events. Timing matters in unpredictable ways. A rumour that circulates while nothing else significant is happening gets more attention and elaboration. The same story introduced during a busy period might get mentioned briefly and forgotten. The information environment constantly shifts based on competing demands for attention. People naturally want to contribute something new to conversations. This desire leads to embellishment and creative additions. Someone repeats a story but adds a detail that makes it more interesting or relevant to local concerns. The next person includes that detail and adds their own. The original information gradually transforms. Certain individuals become known as reliable sources. A merchant who travels regularly might be considered trustworthy about trade routes and regional politics. A former soldier might be asked about military matters. These reputations mean their versions of stories carry more weight, even when they're speculating just like everyone else. Shared suspicion sometimes emerges without any particular evidence. If enough people express vague concerns about something, those concerns start feeling justified simply through repetition. A general unease about a powerful family or institution can persist for years, supported more by accumulated whispers than by specific grievances. Written records rarely exist to contradict popular narratives. Most events leave no documentation accessible to ordinary people. Without the ability to check facts against official accounts, stories perpetuate based purely on their internal consistency and how well they fit existing beliefs about how power operates. Some rumours prove impossible to fully disprove. They involve events that supposedly happened in private or in distant locations. No one can definitively say they didn't occur, so they linger in the collective memory. Decades later, people still mention them as possibilities, keeping the stories alive across generations. Sleep follows the sun's schedule more than personal preference. You go to bed when darkness makes work difficult and rise when light returns. This pattern shifts gradually across seasons, expanding and contracting with the available daylight, but always maintaining its basic rhythm. Your sleeping space is shared, often with family members, and sometimes with animals whose body heat helps ward off cold. Straw mattresses rest on simple wooden frames or directly on packed earth floors. Blankets made from wool provide warmth, layered according to the season's demands. Evening routines begin well before full darkness. Fires get banked to last through the night, providing dim light and residual warmth. Shutters close against wind and weather. Small tasks get completed, putting tools and materials in their proper places. Order matters when you'll need to find things again in morning dimness. The transition to sleep happens gradually. You might sit near the fire for a while after the day's work ends, mending something or simply resting. Conversation, if it happens, tends toward practical matters rather than elaborate storytelling. Energy conservation becomes natural when physical labour defines most waking hours. Dreams occur but rarely get discussed in detail. People mention sleeping well or poorly, but extensive dream interpretation belongs more to scholars and religious figures than to everyday life. Your mind processes the day's experiences while you sleep, but morning brings focus back to immediate tasks. Children fall asleep where they sit sometimes, exhausted from helping with chores or playing outside. They get carried to bed, barely stirring. Their sleep is deep and complete, the kind that comes from bodies still growing and minds not yet burdened with complex worries. Night sounds become familiar. Wind against thatch, animals settling, the occasional creak of wood adjusting to temperature changes. These noises don't disturb sleep because they're expected and normal. Your ears have learned what belongs and what might signal something requiring attention. Seasonal changes affect rest patterns noticeably. Summer nights stay warm enough that heavy coverings aren't needed. Winter requires careful preparation, with all available blankets piled on and bodies pressed close together for warmth. Spring and autumn bring variability, requiring adjustment from night to night. Religious hours continue even in darkness. Monastery bells ring for midnight prayers, though most people sleep through them. The dedicated few who wake for these observances do so out of commitment to spiritual discipline rather than social obligation. Their vigils happen privately while others rest undisturbed. Recovery happens during sleep. Muscles that worked hard during the day repair themselves. Minor aches and strains diminish. The body's natural healing processes operate most effectively during these hours of stillness. You wake feeling ready for another day, not because sleep eliminates all fatigue, but because the rhythm allows for basic restoration. Elderly members of the household often wake earlier and more frequently during the night. They move carefully in darkness, perhaps adding wood to the fire or simply adjusting their position to ease discomfort. These small disturbances rarely wake others who've adapted to the sounds of shared sleeping spaces. Rain on the roof creates a steady background noise that some find soothing. It signals that morning work might begin later or take different forms, allowing for slight variations in the usual routine. The sound of water becomes associated with permission to rest a bit longer. Illness disrupts normal sleep patterns. Someone coughing or feverish requires attention and care. Others in the household adjust, sleeping lighter or taking turns providing comfort. These periods pass, and the household returns to its regular rhythm, though everyone remembers who helped during difficult nights. Morning arrives gradually. Light seeps in through gaps around shutters. Birds begin their calls. Someone rises first, stirring the fire and starting preparations for the day. Others wake one by one, emerging from sleep without alarm or urgency, simply responding to the natural signals that night has ended. The cycle repeats with remarkable consistency. Variations occur due to weather, health, or unusual circumstances, but the fundamental pattern remains stable. This regularity provides psychological comfort, creating a framework within which life feels predictable and manageable, despite uncertainties in other areas. Grain defines wealth in ways that go beyond simple sustenance. The amount of wheat, barley or rye a household stores determines its stability through winter and its ability to manage unexpected difficulties. These stores accumulate slowly through successful harvests and deplete steadily through consumption and obligations. Land ownership concentrates in relatively few hands. Most people farm fields they don't technically own, paying rent through labour or a portion of their harvest. The arrangement continues year after year, maintained by tradition and documented agreements that favour those who already hold power. Mills process grain into flour, but operating a mill requires authorisation and often comes with fees. You bring your grain to the designated mill and pay a percentage for the service. The miller grows prosperous through countless small transactions, accumulating wealth from the steady stream of people who have no alternative. Salt preservation extends the life of meat and fish, making it valuable beyond its taste-enhancing properties. Control over salt sources means control over food security. Trade routes carrying salt connect distant regions, and whoever manages these routes gains significant influence. Tax collection happens through various mechanisms. Officials count livestock, measure stored grain, and assess property values. These evaluations determine what each household owes, payable in goods or labour. The system extracts resources from the many to support the few, maintained through careful record keeping. Feast days and religious obligations require food contributions. Households set aside portions of their production for church tithes and local celebrations. These commitments reduce what remains for personal use but create social cohesion and demonstrate participation in community life. Crop failures affect entire regions simultaneously. When weather prevents successful harvest, everyone faces shortage together. Stored reserves from previous years become critical. Those with deeper reserves can weather the difficulty better, sometimes purchasing additional supplies from those forced to sell at disadvantageous terms. Forest access provides supplementary resources beyond farming. Wood for fuel and construction, game for meat, and mushrooms and berries for food variation. Rights to use forest land get controlled and allocated, with permissions granted or restricted based on social position and formal agreements. Water sources require maintenance and management. Wells need cleaning, irrigation channels need clearing, and mills need flowing water to operate. Communities organise labour to maintain these essential resources, with costs and benefits distributed according to established patterns. Trade goods move along established routes that rarely change. Certain towns become known for specific products like wool, pottery, or metalwork. Merchants follow these routes regularly, creating networks where goods, money, and information all flow together in predictable patterns. Debt relationships bind people across years. Someone borrows grain for planting and owes repayment after harvest, plus interest. These obligations get recorded and enforced, creating ongoing connections between lenders and borrowers that extend beyond single transactions. Livestock represents mobile wealth. Animals can be traded, sold, or used as payment. They reproduce, potentially increasing value over time. Caring for them requires constant effort, but they provide insurance against crop failure and serve multiple practical purposes. Storage facilities matter enormously. A well-built granary protects harvest from moisture and vermin. Poor storage means loss through spoilage. Investment in proper storage infrastructure pays returns every season, protecting accumulated wealth from degradation. Labour itself becomes a resource to be allocated. During harvest, everyone capable helps in the fields. At other times, labour gets directed toward maintenance, construction, or specialised tasks. Controlling how labour gets used means controlling what gets accomplished and who benefits. Markets operate on regular schedules, creating concentrated moments of exchange. Prices fluctuate based on availability, season, and competition. Experienced traders develop an understanding of these patterns, buying when prices drop and selling when they rise, accumulating advantage through many small transactions. Candles and oil lamps provide light after sunset in homes that can afford them. The flame stays small to conserve fuel, creating a circle of illumination surrounded by darkness. Work continues in this limited light, but it shifts to tasks that don't require broad vision or physical space. Scribes spend evening hours copying manuscripts. Their posture hunches over desks, quills moving steadily across parchment. Each letter takes shape deliberately, following practice forms that ensure legibility. The work demands concentration but becomes meditative through repetition. Account books get reviewed by candlelight. Numbers representing transactions, inventories, and obligations fill columns on the page. Clerks verify totals, compare entries, and note discrepancies. This quiet work maintains the records that make administration possible. Reading happens in monasteries and noble households where books exist. Texts get shared among those with literacy and read aloud sometimes so others can hear. Religious works predominate, but historical chronicles and classical writings circulate too, preserved through careful copying. Learning to read requires years of instruction. Students practice letters repeatedly, forming them correctly before moving to words and sentences. The skill remains specialized, marking someone as educated and creating opportunities unavailable to those who never gain literacy. Maps exist but remain rare and often inaccurate. Cartographers combine travellers' accounts, estimated distances, and known landmarks to create representations of territory. These documents get consulted when planning routes or understanding political boundaries, though most people navigate by memory and local knowledge. Letters written in evening quiet carry news and instructions across distances. The writer chooses words carefully, knowing the message will be read by specific eyes in specific circumstances. Privacy depends on trust in the messenger and the seal's integrity. Almanacs track agricultural and religious calendars, providing reference for planning. They note optimal planting times, saints' feast days, and astronomical events. These compilations represent accumulated knowledge passed down and updated across generations. Music exists primarily through memory and practice. Songs get learned by ear and passed along verbally. No system for recording melodies in writing has widespread use yet, so musical tradition depends entirely on continuous transmission from performer to performer. Textile work continues indoors during evening hours. Spinning, weaving, mending, and embroidery all suit limited light conditions. Hands know the motions well enough that vision serves mainly to verify quality rather than guide every movement. Recipes and craft techniques stay largely unwritten. A master brewer or cheesemaker passes knowledge to apprentices through demonstration and verbal instruction. The exact measurements and timing become internalized through repeated practice, rather than consultation of written formulas. Family histories exist as oral traditions in most households. Grandparents tell children about ancestors, preserving names, relationships, and significant events through storytelling. These accounts shape identity and maintain connections across generations despite a lack of written genealogies. Legal precedents get remembered by those who administer justice. A lord or his representatives recall similar cases from the past when making decisions about disputes. This institutional memory operates through people rather than comprehensive written codes. Prayer happens privately in evening hours for those inclined toward personal devotion. The words might follow established forms learned in church, or become more spontaneous expressions of individual concerns and gratitude. These quiet moments of reflection punctuate the day's end. Observations about weather, crops, and animals get shared in casual evening conversation. Someone mentions that frost came unusually early this year. Another notes that certain birds haven't migrated when expected. These details accumulate into practical knowledge about local conditions. Darkness settles over communities with predictable completeness. Artificial light remains expensive enough that most extinguish flames soon after necessary tasks finish. The night becomes a time of stillness rather than continued activity. Guards maintain watch in certain locations. Castle walls, monastery gates, and wealthy households employ people to stay alert through dark hours. These watchmen follow established routes, checking doors and listening for unusual sounds. Their presence provides security without drama or incident most nights. Church bells mark hours even in darkness. The sound carries across sleeping towns, maintaining temporal structure throughout the night. Those awake for any reason can orient themselves in time through these regular signals. Animals settle into their own routines. Chickens roost silently. Cows and sheep rest in barns or pens. Guard dogs remain alert but quiet unless something genuinely unusual occurs. The animal world adjusts to nighttime just as the human one does. Street activity ceases almost entirely in most places. A few major cities maintain some nighttime commerce and movement, but villages and small towns empty after dark. Walking through streets at night happens rarely and usually for specific purposes, like fetching help during an emergency. Fire safety requires attention before sleep. Embers get arranged carefully, provided with fuel that will burn slowly without sending sparks beyond the hearth. The risk of uncontrolled fire motivates careful evening procedures that become second nature. Temperature drops as night progresses, especially in colder months. Buildings retain some warmth from daytime fires, but eventually the chill penetrates. People burrow deeper into bedding, sometimes waking briefly to adjust coverings before drifting back to sleep. Moon phases affect nighttime visibility significantly. A full moon allows limited navigation and work if necessary. New moons bring near-total darkness that makes movement difficult and potentially dangerous. The cycle creates predictable variation in nighttime conditions. Starlight provides orientation for those who know the sky. Familiar constellations mark seasons and directions. Travellers study these patterns, learning to use them when clouds don't obscure the view. This knowledge passes between generations as practical information. Silence isn't absolute. Wind moves through trees and across fields. Water flows in streams and rivers. Owls hunt and call. The night has its own soundscape, different from day but no less natural. These sounds blend into background awareness for those accustomed to them. Illness or injury sometimes requires nighttime attention. Someone rises to tend a sick child or address sudden pain. These disruptions happen by necessity rather than choice, managed quietly to avoid disturbing others more than required. Dreams fill the sleeping mind with images and scenarios that feel vivid in the moment. Upon waking, most fade quickly, leaving only vague impressions. Occasionally a dream lingers, puzzling or pleasant, carried into morning consciousness. Security comes through familiar routine rather than elaborate precautions. Doors close with simple latches. Valuables, if any exist, stay in known locations. The expectation that night will be like other nights creates calm acceptance rather than anxious vigilance. Morning preparation begins before full light. The first person awake rekindles the fire, coaxing flames from preserved embers. This task marks the transition from night to day, resuming activity after hours of rest. The cycle continues regardless of individual circumstance. Whether someone sleeps well or poorly, whether the night brings storm or stillness, morning follows darkness with reliable certainty. This dependability anchors daily life in patterns larger than any single person's experience. Centuries later, researchers examine medieval records with careful attention. Parchment documents preserved in archives reveal arrangements that contemporary people suspected but couldn't prove. The written evidence confirms that certain families did indeed make secret agreements, that some officials did manipulate records for personal gain, and that power operated through hidden channels alongside visible ones. Archaeological evidence supports some of the old stories. Excavations uncover hidden chambers, concealed passages, and buried caches that match descriptions passed down through generations. What seemed like legend occasionally turns out to have a physical foundation, validated through scientific examination. Scholarly analysis of medieval financial records exposes sophisticated manipulation techniques. Clerks did alter account books to hide theft or redirect funds. The methods varied in complexity, but the fundamental pattern appears repeatedly across different regions and time periods. Some conspiracies were exactly what people whispered about. Land ownership disputes that seemed settled during the medieval period get reassessed through modern legal history research. Forged documents that granted property rights receive scrutiny. In several documented cases, powerful families did use fraudulent charters to claim land that rightfully belonged to others, exactly as contemporary rumours suggested. Political marriages arranged in secret become visible through correspondence that survived in monastery archives. Letters reveal negotiations that occurred privately, with public announcements only after agreements were finalised. The matchmaking that people speculated about in markets and fields did happen behind closed doors. Church investigations from the medieval period, recorded in ecclesiastical archives, document misconduct that people discussed in whispers. Some religious figures did abuse their positions. Some institutions did prioritize wealth accumulation over spiritual mission. The concerns that circulated as gossip had a basis in documented reality. Military campaigns that seemed poorly planned or strangely executed receive new interpretation when historians discover correspondence between supposed enemies. A few medieval conflicts did involve secret cooperation between combatants, with public hostilities masking private agreements about how to divide territory or resources. Poisoning cases that generated rumours about noble households sometimes find confirmation in medical examination of preserved remains. Modern forensic analysis detects toxic substances in bones and tissue, validating suspicions that certain deaths weren't natural. The quiet concerns people expressed had a foundation in hidden violence. Trade monopolies that seemed suspiciously strong get explained through the discovery of secret agreements between merchants and authorities. Written contracts show that some traders did pay officials for exclusive rights, exactly as competitors suspected. The economic arrangements that felt unfair often were precisely that. Despite these revelations about concealed power and hidden manipulation, daily life for most medieval people continued in familiar patterns. Crops still needed planting regardless of political scheming. Animals required care whether or not distant authorities were plotting. The fundamental rhythms of survival and work persisted. Modern understanding of medieval conspiracies doesn't dramatically change the basic historical narrative. Yes, some powerful people conspired. Yes, some institutions operated corruptly. But these discoveries mostly confirm what many people at the time already suspected. The surprises come mainly in specific details rather than overall patterns. What remains most striking in reviewing medieval life isn't the conspiracies themselves, but rather how little they affected everyday routines for ordinary people. Life happened in fields, workshops, and homes, shaped more by weather and season than by secret agreements made in distant manor houses or church councils. The records that prove medieval conspiracies true also show extensive documentation of normal administration. For every forged charter, hundreds of legitimate ones exist. For every corrupt official, many others performed their duties honestly. The systems functioned imperfectly, but continuously. Modern historians note that while some conspiracies existed and operated successfully for years or decades, they eventually left evidence. The human impulse to document, to write things down, and to create records ultimately reveals what was meant to stay hidden. Secrets kept through spoken agreement can vanish, but written evidence persists. You can imagine yourself in that medieval landscape now, knowing what's known today. The routines continue. Bread gets baked. Fields get worked. Children grow. Behind these activities, power operates in ways not always visible or fair. But life itself, immediate, physical, demanding, requires attention regardless of what might be happening elsewhere. Evening comes again, as it has for countless generations. Light fades, work stops. People settle into rest. Whatever schemes exist in distant courts or monasteries, whatever arrangements powerful figures have made in secret, the night still brings its familiar quiet. Sleep still restores. Morning still comes. The pattern continues, steady and remarkably resilient, carrying forward through seasons and centuries, exactly as it always has.